maybe we can start. Okay, welcome everyone to our blockchain meeting. I wish to thank Vahap Samanlı. Okay, Vahap, you're here for suggesting this topic. And Kıvanç, who will be our moderator, who I think is a student of Ulrich, to bring Ulrich to our meeting. And Ulrich, thank you very much for willing to give a presentation here. You know how the flow of the meeting. Kıvanç will introduce Ulrich, and then Ulrich will deliver his speech in 2 sections, and at the end of each one, we'll have he'll answer the written questions, and towards the end of the second part, we'll turn to verbal questions, sort of like verbal discussions, like we do in all our meetings. Okay, welcome everyone again. Kıvanç. Okay, in written questions, if you do not know the English of the technical term, you're not aware of the technology, the terminology, you can probably write Kıvanç in Turkish, that word, and maybe you can translate. Değil mi Kıvanç? Ne diyorsun?
Yes, exactly. We can take questions in either language, and I will.
Sesim bana az geliyor. Yani ben biraz daha sesli konuşur musun?
Yes, I think it might be the microphone. Yeah, we can take questions in either language, Turkish or English, and I will pose them to Uli in English in the Q&A part of this presentation.
Okay. And if this is for everyone, if you have any problems, any issue with with hearing any of the speakers, especially Kıvanç and Uli, please write to them direct. Okay. Welcome everyone. Kıvanç, mikrofon senin.
Thank you. Maybe I can also start like yesterday with a quick introduction of us to you, Uli. We are mostly from 2 American schools in Turkey with a lot of history. One is the Talas College, was founded in 1871, according to Wikipedia. I'm from the Tarsus College, which was founded in 1888. So there are a lot of alumni here in attending from Turkey, also from other places around the world. Let me introduce then Uli to the attendants. He's a researcher at the Technical University of Munich, at the chair of software engineering for business information systems. Uli, I read your profile on the chair's website, so I'm going to summarize that. He wrote his master's thesis on the legal use cases of blockchain technology. He's researching on the data analytics of public blockchains, and he spoke at various international conferences and also to companies like Allianz, IBM, and over different online channels. He won 2 blockchain hackathons in Copenhagen and Munich, and then also served in the jury of a recent hackathon in Berlin. He is lecturing me and my classmates over blockchain-based systems engineering. That's why I thought he would be a great speaker to us about the use cases and basically what blockchain is.
Yeah, thank you very much for this short introduction and for mentioning the details on my page. I should have updated that beforehand. So when I can share my screen, I could start with my presentation. I don't have the right currently to do so. So maybe someone who's moderating this Zoom meeting could give me.
You want to share the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make you a co-host. Just one moment. Okay, go ahead now.
Let's try. That looks good. Let's take it. One second. So I think you can now see my screen. Does it work?
Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Very good. Okay, thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk here. So my name is Ulrich Gallersdörfer. I'm going to talk today about blockchain and its applications. I'm a PhD student at the Technical University of Munich, as already said, in my main area of research. So I did a lot of data analytics in the past, but I recently shifted to identity management in blockchain. So I'm very curious of how to identify actors within these networks. And also, as my colleague mentioned here, I'm also studying a lot of blockchain applications in terms of, okay, where can we apply the technology? Where is it useful? And so on and so forth. The teaching was already mentioned here. I'm teaching blockchain-based systems engineering for the third time. We started in 2018, and each summer we host up to 500, 600 students, and we're really successful with that. And if you're interested in all these contents of this lecture, so I'm having a small excerpt today out of this lecture, and a little bit boiled down in the complexity. But if you're really interested in this technology and in this topic, all our contents, our slides are freely available on the web, and you can scan this QR code or type in this URL and take a look at that. Okay, so we have two sections today where I want to talk about, and the first one is Bitcoin and blockchain. So that's the first part in terms of, okay, how does the underlying technology work? So Bitcoin was the first blockchain, and we're taking a look at that and take until like the fourth. So when we take here a look at economic aspects of blockchains, will be the last part of the first section. And afterwards, we will talk about smart contracts and applications. So where can we really put to this blockchain technology to use, so that we really understand what's going on there, what are the limitations, what are the difficulties, and sort of give an outlook to you so that you know, hey, what's going on, how is it going to further develop, what is still missing, and that you that we have some open points for discussion in the end. Okay, so let's start. Bitcoin was introduced in 2008, so it's almost 12 years ago that Satoshi Nakamoto, a pseudonym, so we do not know who she is it a group, and we do not know about that, wrote a paper called Bitcoin and Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash Systems. And Bitcoin is actually the first ever purely peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So you might think about something like Visa, MasterCard, some credit cards, or some SEPA transfer, where you can transfer money from bank account to bank account. But these are not really peer-to-peer, and these are not really distributed. So, and so a little bit the noise is, many people try to join. So I don't have to add them, or? From the waiting room.
No,
okay, very good. And Bitcoin was since then very successful. So maybe you looked at the current price charts. We are currently at right around $9,000 US per one Bitcoin, and it still works. It's still fully functional. And that's really a magnificent accomplishment for such a technology for 12 years, where there is no company behind it. It's purely decentralized and purely independent from any third party. And to talk about that, Bitcoin was actually the first blockchain. And when we talk about blockchain, there are two different definitions we're going to take a look at. And the first of all is a technical definition. So a blockchain is a distributed database that maintains a continuously growing list of ordered records called blocks. Each block contains a timestamp and a link to a previous block. By design, blockchains are inherently resistant to modification of the data. Once recorded, the data in a block cannot be altered retroactively. So that's from the English Wikipedia. And also there's a functional description, so in terms of what does blockchain try to achieve. And Richard Brown from R3 proposed a definition that blockchains are systems that enable parties who do not fully trust each other to form and maintain a consensus about the existence, status, and evolution of a set of shared facts. And these two definitions apply 100% to Bitcoin. So Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system where you can transfer money to anywhere around the world are, first of all, inherently resistant to modification. So it's you cannot change it, no one can really attack it. But also all these participants, so if you would today join Bitcoin, the Bitcoin network, you would be able to participate in the forming and maintaining of the consensus about the existence, status, and evolution of the existence of these Bitcoins, that these Bitcoins really exist, that if you transfer them, that you do not belong, that you don't own them anymore. So that's very important in terms of a blockchain. And I think at this point, it's very important to say that Bitcoin is only one blockchain system. And there are thousands of blockchains out there, and they have different properties, different abilities. And while Bitcoin is the largest one, there are many other blockchains which have a much more functionality in them. So that's very important on this point. So do not confuse Bitcoin and blockchain. But as Bitcoin is the first blockchain, it's actually the easiest one to understand. This section is going to talk about Bitcoin because it's easy to understand. First of all, before we start here with how it actually works, I want to briefly mention two cryptographic basics. So you might be a little bit scared of cryptography, mathematics, that's complicated. So I really boiled it down to very simple ideas so that you can understand that. And the first of all is the concept of digital identities. And a digital identity is a concept and the idea is a human or a computer can create an arbitrary amount of digital identities and express his or her will for these identities. So you can think of like you can create multiple digital faces, so to say, and you keep a password to yourself. And with this password, you're able to express your will for these identity, for these faces, so to say. So for example, if one of these faces owns some Bitcoin, you are able with your password to say, okay, I want to transfer these Bitcoins away to some other party. And it looks like that. So I really brought it with me so that you see that how it actually looks. So these are strings and these are text, so to say. And the public part you see here is, so to say, the face of it. And this private part is, so to say, the password. And these are complex mathematical structures. We don't need to understand how they actually work. But that's the assumption that we can take right here. We are able to create an arbitrary amount of digital identities, and we can express the will for these identities without anyone being able to interfere with that. So it's not like anyone can guess my private password here. So that's the important part here. That's about digital identities. The second thing is about hash functions. And hash functions is a mathematical procedure that allows us to create fingerprints for arbitrary large files. And these fingerprints are unique, and we can easily check that they are correct. And these fingerprints are built in such a way that we are not really able to create two different files, which create the same fingerprint. So we have a large input space. We don't care how much data we put in there, and the hash function generates an output, and this output is always the same length. So for example, we could put a PDF file in our hash function, and it would generate some kind of data like here. So every time we put the data in this PDF file, the same fingerprint is getting out of this hash function. But if we change this data a little bit, only very small changes, then this fingerprint will change completely. And that's it. That's the basic two cryptographic premises we need to understand how a blockchain works. So let's take a look at this. How does a blockchain work? Bitcoin as an example. So first of all, as Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer cash system, we have to think about how do transactions look like. And we have a very simplified view of that here. So we have a table, we have a from column, so we have a party. So Alice, for example, transfers to Bob, to B, an amount of 5 coins. Our assumption is that A starts with 10 coins. And these are transactions after transactions after transactions after transactions. With this digital identity we had before, we are able to express these wills and to express and verify that these transactions are in fact correct. And these transactions here, they are, we have a implicit state connected to them. So, for example, if you execute all of these transactions, then at the end you will wind up with a state. So, for example, A has only 1 coin left, or D has also 1 coin left. And that's very important here. Bitcoin only stores the transactions, but the state that's connected to these transactions. So when you execute these transactions, this is stored implicitly. So there is no way that we are able to read this from the data, but we have to go through each transaction to get to the current state. And this is what blockchain does. So blockchain groups these transactions, these single transactions, into each block, and each block therefore represents a state of all transactions that have been executed to this point. So let's take a look at the structure of the blockchain itself. And this is a real block from the Bitcoin blockchain. So it's a block 100,952. And here we see 4 data fields. The first one is the height of the block. So how many blocks have there been before? We have a date, so it's 2011, and the 1st of April, now the 4th of January, I'm sorry. And we have 2 data points here that exactly looks like a hash, like the result of a hash. And the first one is we link transactions to our block, and we also link the hash of the previous block header to this current block. And with that, we create a chain that is immutable. Because as you know, as I told you right before, with hash functions, they create a unique fingerprint out of data. And if this data slightly changes, then the hash function will return a complete different result. And therefore, we have now created a chain that is immutable, so to say. And what you see here is, as an end result, is that this block header also has a hash. So we can calculate again a fingerprint of the current block. And that's super awesome, because this hash or this string or this text now represents a state, because this text represents a block and the block represents a state in terms of who owns which money. So our network, because this is only locally on one machine, our network has to only agree to this information, to this small piece of information here. I don't know if you see my, I can put a laser pointer here. So we only have to agree to this point of data. And if we agree on that, then we agree on who owns which money, what transaction have happened. So this is a very, very easy way to agree overall on what's going on. Let's continue. So as I said, the network has only to agree on one block, and that makes it very easy to say, okay, how can we get the network on the same state? We need the network on the same state because this state is a reality. So you can imagine, like, we live in one reality where you look at your bank account and you know how much cash there is on it. But if there are alternative realities in terms of, okay, I'm looking at a different reality than you are, then we have different perceptions on what is on your bank account. And that's very bad. So we need to have a common state, a common reality. And now I'm going to show you how the Bitcoin network actually agrees on one common network, on one common state. And this is a small, this is a graph, so to say. You see here on the top left is the network. So our network is composed out of 7 nodes, and it's color coding. So we see block 0, we say block 1. We see that every part of the network is on block 1. So that's our initial assumption, and we have 3 rules. The first one is that we're only allowed to accept valid blocks. The longest chain wins, and first blocks always first. So what this means, I'll tell you in a second. So we don't care now how blocks are found. We just assume that they are created. And this node up here creates a new block, the block 2, the green block 2. And this block is sent from this node to all other nodes, to all other parties in the network. So they apply the rules, only valid blocks, the longest chain wins. So this block 2 is obviously valid. It's also longer than the previous blockchain they have. So the previous blockchain was consisting out of 2 blocks, and now they are out of 3. So that's valid, and there is no other concurring block there. And that happens again. So the same node again finds I'll have to put my laser pointer, I'm sorry. The same block here finds the same node finds a block and also transmits it to the network. But then something happens. Another participant in the network finds another block. And now the scenario happened which we did not want. We have 2 different realities. We have the blue blocks. The blue block 3 defines one reality, and the purple block defines one reality. And now we have to think about how can we really resolve this issue. And Bitcoin is very powerful because it says, okay, we just continue with our process and someone will find a block 4. And this block 4 can only reference one of the 2 previous blocks and therefore wins the race. So the network says, okay, this block 4 is again the longest, and this block 3 here is orphaned. So it's not used anymore, and the network does not care anymore. Transactions which are included in block number 3 will find its way into the blockchain in block 5 or block 6. So there is no worry about block 3, about the purple one here. It will just be included in the next chains. So this is how blockchain, or how any blockchain system comes to one common state or one common reality. That's very important, or that's one of the key innovations that happened here in blockchain. And who is allowed to create new blocks? As you know, or as I want to tell you, is that these networks, these blockchain networks are open, so anyone can join. You can join anytime you want. People join anytime, people leave anytime, and we do not know how many people are in there. So we need some kind of a way to say, okay, we want to be able to create new blocks, which is resilient to people joining and people leaving. And so the solution to this is that we use a scarce resource, and this scarce resource is computation power. So computational power, energy usage, that's what Bitcoin drives. So what other Bitcoin or other blockchains are driven by is always computational power here. And this computational power is used to solve a puzzle. And this puzzle has 3 properties. So first of all, it has to be hard to solve. It has to be easy to verify. So only one party should be able to solve it in a certain amount of time. So in Bitcoin, every 10 minutes, a block is proposed, a new block is found. But it's very easy to verify that the solution to this puzzle is correct. And we need an adjustable difficulty because, as I said, the network grows or shrinks at any point of time. So we need to be able to adjust for that. I'm not really going into how it actually works. I think that's too deep, too technical. If you're interested in that, we can talk about it in the discussion section. But this puzzle is very computational intensive and very expensive in terms of energy consumption. But there are alternative approaches that do not have the high power consumptions. And this is currently being developed and tested and takes a lot of time because it's very complicated to find other versions of puzzles which do not rely on computational resources, so to say. Okay, let's settle a little bit for the technical part. So this is how the technology works behind it. Now we can take a little bit of a look at the economic aspects of the blockchain. So the first question you might ask yourself is, if this takes so much energy, why is someone investing the computational power to keep this network alive? And the money is, the reason is very easy, and it's always money. And if you want to participate in Bitcoin, there are two ways to earn money in there. And, or there are two incentives to earn money. And the first of all is transaction fees. So every party that sends money or uses the system to transfer Bitcoins, they pay a small fee for that. And you, as someone who proposes new blocks, are able to collect these transaction fees. And the second part, which is the much more interesting part, is the so-called mining reward. And for each block you find the solution for, you create a valid solution for this puzzle, you get rewarded with Bitcoins. And currently this is 6.25 Bitcoins every 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes a block is proposed. And you can see that's a shitload of money. So 50,000 US dollars are created every 10 minutes in the Bitcoin network. And this is defined by a supply. So there's a Bitcoin supply, and it will in the end result in 21 million Bitcoins. And this is the reason, because every 210,000 blocks, this reward is halved. So this just happened in May 2020. So it's really a big event, so to say. It's like a solar eclipse in the Bitcoin world. So everyone talks about it. And we were halved from 12.5 to 6.25 Bitcoins per 10 minutes. Okay. So you see a lot of money in the game. And also from an ecologic perspective, this is really a crazy game. So doesn't it cost a lot of electricity? And the answer is yes, it costs a shitload of electricity. So energy consumption in Bitcoin, what I'm doing in my lecture is provide a simple example. We actually published, I wrote an article on how to calculate the energy consumption and the carbon footprint for Bitcoin. But this is a more simpler approach. So the idea is to calculate the energy consumption. We can estimate how many tries machines need to get a valid solution for a Bitcoin block. And this number is this up here. So this is 107 exahashes per second. So it's a number that is not really, so it's 10.7 times 10 to the power of 90. So that's tries per second the network does. And now we can take one hardware. So this is a specialized designed hardware. It only is usable for Bitcoin, for nothing else, and it's very efficient. But we would obviously need 7 million of these pieces of hardware to generate this amount of speed, or to generate the amount of tries per second. And with that, we come to a number 10.4 gigawatt, yeah. And that's crazy, because if you compare it to the a nuclear power plant, so this is the nuclear power plant that's from my hometown, so to say, which produces 1,400 megawatt, and Bitcoin consumes 10,400 gigawatts. So roughly nine times of a Bitcoin consumes nine of these power plants. And that's really the crazy part here. And that's something that is heavily discussed, and obviously the carbon footprint that's associated with this is huge. So in our calculations, Bitcoin emits as much CO2 as Las Vegas per year, and that's really crazy. But that's how the basic system works. That's how the underlying system works. And now we are at the part where I would say, okay, let's take a break, ask questions about the technical details, about the economic aspects of it, and then we can continue on the topic smart contracts and how can we use this technology to really suit our needs. So where can we use it? What are the advantages, disadvantages? Obviously, energy consumption is one of the disadvantages, but there are many more, and then we can talk a little bit about that.
We can take questions over chat. form in Turkish or English?
Ulrich, can we go back? Can you unshare the screen till Ulrich? Can you unshare the screen till we start your second sitting?
So should I stop sharing my screen?
No. Okay, fine.
No, as you want.
Okay.
So
Kıvanç, bir soru var aşağıda.
We have one question now, Uli. Mr. Gür asks, in case of disputes between parties, how are such legal issues resolved? And what have been the major legal issues during the last 12 years?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mehmet, for this question. That's a very, very interesting question. It's a very good question. How are legal issues resolved in these systems? And Bitcoin has been a place where a lot of fraud happens. A lot of, for example, people who are so. For example, there is a lot of viruses out there which encrypt your data and which force you to pay Bitcoin to retrieve your data back. And Bitcoin is often used as a means to funnel this money in an anonymous way out of the victims' computers. And there is no real answer to, is there any legal issue? Is there any legal system out there? Because there isn't. So the Bitcoin itself is truly trustless. So if, for example, your money gets stolen, or you have some kind of payments you want to take back, there is no one to ask. There is no one to talk to, and therefore all these issues are open. So they're in other ways. So if you use blockchain in a business context, you can introduce actors, you can introduce legal rules. But in Bitcoin or in these public blockchains I'm most interested in, there is hardly any regulation applying. So obviously you can identify people, or you try to identify people, and then you take the regular legal system that's out there and sue them for damages. So that's what happens, and then what can happen. But apart from that, the system is very resistant and not really. There is no way to have some kind of judge say, okay, please transfer the money back or something. That doesn't work.
I think the next two questions are somehow related, so I'm going to ask them together. Mr. Samanlı asks, do all blockchain applications, for example, in supply chains, use this much energy as a Bitcoin? And Mr. Suha Önan asks, mining is very expensive on hardware and on energy consumption, but still there are a lot of people in mining. Basically, why are they doing that?
Okay, so these are two questions. So first of all, when we talk about blockchain and the energy consumption, this first and foremost applies to Bitcoin, as the network is huge and a lot of people are in there. But for example, if you think about business blockchains and more, so this technology can be used in any kind of network, and they use the mechanisms to agree on a common state, on a common reality, are much less energy requiring. So if you talk about business blockchains, about other blockchains, they don't need that much energy. So it's comparable with a traditional server-side application. So like Facebook, Google, they all need a lot of energy, but there is no comparison with Bitcoin. So that's not an issue when we talk about private blockchains, about blockchains where all the actors are known to each other. And this is often applies in business context. And the second one is how many people are mining, or if it costs that much energy, then why do people do that? And the reason for that is the miners who are using this software, you're using this hardware, and you're using this energy, they are experts, they are professionals. This is an industry. So these are companies who earn money with that. And they earn money because they are very efficient, they have the efficient hardware, they have the efficient cooling, and they can, so to say, spend the money they earn into this hardware to keep their facilities running and still making a profit. But if you, or here in Germany, we pay, so I'm paying like 30 cents on the kilowatt hour, and the miners who do this for a profit, they pay 1 to 3 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So 20 or 30, I pay 20 or 30 times the energy price that these miners have to pay. So that's still a profitable business.
Mm-hmm. We have another question about ethical issues from Mr. Özgödek. What do you think about the ethical issues surrounding this blockchain technology, especially Bitcoin?
Yeah, so ethical issues, there is a huge load of ethical issues. I'm not sure where to start. So maybe with the low-hanging fruit here, energy consumption, carbon footprint is a huge issue. That's something we need to solve. That's something that's not only applying Bitcoin, but every energy-intensive industry. So we need to solve that. But there are also this whole darknet stuff going on, illegal transactions using with Bitcoin, buying drugs, buying weapons with Bitcoin. This is also a problem, I think, that's often discussed, but it's not that, from my opinion and from my point of view and from my experience in data analytics in Bitcoin transactions, the problem is not that prevalent as you would think. So it's not as important as you would think. The reason for that is that you can transfer anonymously within Bitcoin, but you're not really able to get the money out. So for example, if you want to change Bitcoin for euros or for dollars or some other currency, you are having the problem that you need to identify yourself to this exchange. You can transfer small amounts of money, like $500. You can exchange them anonymously, but if you want to really have the large amounts of money, so that you would need for terrorism, that you would need for drugs, that you would need for all these illegal activities, is not really there. So there's an interesting comparison. The U.S. drug market, what Mexico or what Mexican cartels import into the U.S. is equivalent to the market value of Bitcoin. So every year, the amount of money that is transferred, or the amount of drugs that's transferred from Mexico to US, equals the amount of all Bitcoins, of the worth of all the wealth of, so the amount of Bitcoins, how much these Bitcoins are worth. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Another question we have from Mr. Ertürk is, are there any regulation exercised on this energy consumption? But I think it might be worthwhile to consider regulation on blockchains in general. And
so the regulation would have to be worldwide. There are some states which, in US, there are some states which banned mining. But apart from that, there is no regulation that applies to that. So 70% of all mining facilities are located in China. And therefore, the regulations there apply, but I have no insights into that, what the specific regularities are.
And another question now is the value of any currency in a traditional sense depends on a number of identifiable factors. Fiscal policies, monetary policies, etc. What do you think about the Bitcoin rates? What causes it to change or fluctuate?
So the central advantage that is proposed by these Bitcoin fans is that Bitcoin has a deflational monetary policy. So as I said before, we have this 21 million Bitcoin, and there will not be more Bitcoins than 21 million. So that's something that the supply is fixed. People lose money, people lose their password, so to say, to their identities, and therefore the overall amount of Bitcoins that's available to the market is going down. So that's a deflationary model here. But apart from that, there is no economic reason. So there is obviously economic reason behind the price of Bitcoin, and that's just that's supply and demand in terms of people buy, people sell, people buy Bitcoins and take it out of the market. But apart from that, there is no economy there. That is in terms of, okay, there is some kind of like a land or some country where only Bitcoinians live and where this all takes place. But it has a huge demand, and the supply that is coming out of this mining reward is increasingly shrinking. So that's why a lot of people argue for Bitcoin to rise in value. So, but I don't comment on Bitcoin price or something like that, because that's not my expertise, or I think that's not something to you can really scientifically argue about.
Yeah, another question is about the value of blockchains. I think you mentioned a little bit a few things in that direction, but what is the benefit from using blockchains? Some people do data processing, and in the end they make money on the blockchains. What is really the function it serves?
So the function of Bitcoin is to enable peer-to-peer transactions of money without any third party. So if you go to a shop and pay with your local currency, then you are dependent on the third party of the state. So you trust that the state is not printing huge amounts of money throughout the night and is devaluing this currency. And this is something that Bitcoin, there is no one who could change this. And what it's very easy to compare with is Bitcoin is like gold. So it's scarce, it's easily to transfer. It has no real function. So gold has a little bit of function, but in the comparison, how much gold there is and how little you need for, I don't know, for your computer or for electronics. So this is a very easy, very, very, very good to compare here. But from that part, this transfer is the first function, and all the other functions, all the other applications. This is what's next in this talk.
Okay, I think I've been warned that I may have misunderstood the question. I'll read it exactly. So, what benefit does this activity actually deliver? The activity being, some people do a lot of data processing, and in the end they make money. How? I think Mr. Suzar is referring to the mining activity.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm wrong, Mr. Suzar, please also.
So this Bitcoin itself, if you look at it from a purely technical point of view, it's worthless. It's worthless because anyone could set up such a system and create an indefinite amount of such coins in its own system. That what Bitcoin does is that it has a huge amount of trust. A lot of people trust in the integrity of the system and trust in the algorithms and the mathematics behind it. And this trust is, if you think about function of money, so there are 5-6 functions of money. I'm not sure if I can recall them all, but it has to be easily transferable. It has to be we need the ability to split it up into different parts. So like a cow is not really easily splittable, but 10 euros can be split into single euros. It should not devalue, and we need a trust of the people. And the trust of the people in the system is what makes the Bitcoin valuable and gives the incentive to these miners to run the network. And what these miners do is, by spending this energy and this money and earning this money, is they run the network and they ensure that no one can attack the network, that no one is able to infiltrate it and to change amounts or fake transactions. This is what the miners do. They provide the integrity to the network, and they are paid accordingly to the rules of the network.
The next question is about the criminal use of Bitcoin. Mr. Önen asks, every transaction seems to be traceable. So how could this be used in dark web or in criminal cases?
So it's traceable in terms of that we can that we can see which phase owns which Bitcoin and which phase transferred Bitcoins to another phase. But we do not always know this phase to real-world identity connection. So maybe I'm owning 1,000 or 1 million of these phases on the Bitcoin blockchain, but no one can really attribute this phase to me or these phases to me. And therefore, for example, if I sell weed on the darknet and I get paid with Bitcoin, I could also buy weapons with these Bitcoins I earned by selling weed, something like that. So obviously I'm not doing this, but that's something how you would be able to stay anonymous within this system while these transactions are all being traceable.
Yeah. Thanks. The next question is somehow related. Is there a body that's guaranteeing the safety of financial transactions? Is there an auditing authority?
So there is no guarantee. There is no one to talk to. It's decentralized. The founder, Satoshi Nakamoto, has vanished. He vanished in 2012. And so therefore, the network itself has no authority, but the network itself is the authority. And you can join the network and you can audit each and every transaction. You can start your node, you can start listening to transactions on the network. And with that, you're able to verify if the transactions are correct and if everything works as expected. So everyone can audit it, and everyone actually does. So if you're participating in the network, the chances that you validate transactions and audit it is very high.
And we have two slightly technical questions. One is from Mr. Önan. Is double spending of the same Bitcoin an issue? Is it completely safe in terms of that? And the other question is from Mr. Is Bitcoin created as one Bitcoin all the time? Are there Bitcoin cents created?
Okay, so the first one on double spending is exactly what the network does. So double spending would be if two alternate realities would exist. In one where I spend a Bitcoin to you, and in the other reality I spend the Bitcoin to myself. I send it to myself. So, and this would be a double spending pattern. But as Bitcoin keeps one reality, and in this reality there are no double spends allowed because you only can spend the money once. Therefore, Bitcoin and this network prevents this double spending. If the network would decrease and fewer people would participate, then you can. There's a cost assigned to attacking the network. And if this cost goes down to a feasible amount, so to say, okay, attacking the network for 1 hour costs $10,000, then people would start doing it. But currently, the cost to pay to attack the network to create such a double spend is way more than you would have as an incentive. So you would not gain that much money that you would have to pay. The second one is Bitcoin created as one Bitcoin, or are there Bitcoin cents created also? So actually, there are one Bitcoin is 100 million Satoshis. So Satoshis is the smallest currency in Bitcoin, and so in the Bitcoin network, and one Bitcoin is worth 100 million Satoshis. But that's just that's just splitting up, and there are, so to say, these Bitcoin cents. And apart from that, there are many, many more Satoshis in the system. But in the end, only 21 million Bitcoin.
I think we've reached the end of the questions.
Very good.
So maybe we can move on to your second delivery then.
Yeah, okay. So let's take a look. I'm sharing my screen again.
Sure.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so let's talk about smart contracts and applications. So what I now showed you was this very simple architecture. We have here a network layer. Where's my laser pointer? We have our underlying blockchain, and on top of this blockchain, our application runs. So this ledger, the transactions, the rules for this, And on top of that, we had the data, our transactions. So this is the simple version of a blockchain. And now we could think about, okay, we want to not only create peer-to-peer money, but we would also we want other applications. And now we could go and say, okay, we create, for each application we create our own blockchain. And for land registry, we create a blockchain. For identities, we create a blockchain. For all the many applications we have, we create our own blockchain. But that's not really practical, because all these networks are very small and they would be very easy to attack. So what people thought of is, okay, maybe we need some kind of a general purpose blockchain, like the Swiss knife of blockchain, so to say. And what they come up with is to say, we want not a blockchain which runs one application, but a blockchain which runs multiple applications. So, and what they said is, we create a virtual machine, so to say, which can run any application on top of one blockchain. And these applications that we can run in this virtual machine are called smart contracts. And this is something where we are able to say, we have a general describable application. We can code it as any other software. So if you ever have coded, you know that's not too difficult, or it's easy to start but difficult to master. And we can install these smart contracts, these applications on top of our blockchain, and they can serve as an individual application that's independent of the underlying technology here. And I brought a smart contract here with me, and we don't have to go line by line through it, but I just want to give you an example how it looks like. And this is a smart contract, an application for a lottery. So, for example, imagine you would go on the street and would say, okay, I'm starting a lottery here. You can participate. Just give me money. I give you a ticket. And in the end, I'm going to decide who is going to win. And this is something that's will not really happen on the street, but in a blockchain where your smart contract is immutable. So you can store the smart contract and you cannot change it later on. People really see that the transactions that are sent to the smart contract, to these applications, are executed. So all these properties that we thought of before, like this immutable blockchain, like it's transparent, we know everything, that also applies to this application. And in this case, we can now create a smart contract called lottery. And we have, so to say, 4 or 3 functionalities. So first of all, the lottery manager can create a smart contract. Very easy to set up the lottery. And users just enter this lottery. They just enter and say, okay, I wanna be part of that. And when after a certain amount of people have joined, then the manager can execute this pick winner function and can select upon this out of all participants one winner, and the money is transferred. And you can be sure as a user, hey, that works. That is exactly as I want it to be. There is no hidden way. There is no hidden path that the lottery owner will run away with my money. I can trust what I see here. And when we talk about the advantages here, we have several of them. So first of all, we have a guaranteed execution. So all the smart contracts that are on there, when I send a transaction, when I want to execute something, I have the guarantee that it's executed as I intend to. The second one is we have an integrated payment system. So you don't have really an issue with in terms of I need to install my PayPal. I need to give my credit card information. Maybe I do some kind of bank transfer, which takes 2 days. We don't all have that. So we have an integrated payment system that is automatically integrated, and you don't have to give any private data to the other party to execute this transaction. Also, the code, as I said, is openly available and verifiable. So there is no real reason for anyone to try to cheat, because we can look at your code and can say, okay, you are cheating. You have built a smart contract which does not do what you promised would happen. And also we have no costs for host or for the provisioning of this system. So for example, if you have a web shop and you sell, I don't know, CDs or music or whatever, then you would need to pay web hosting costs. You need to update the website, stuff like that. And these costs for running the server, you don't have to pay for that. That's just on the blockchain stored once. But there are also some disadvantages in terms of applications on the blockchain. And this is, for example, the execution time is consuming, so it takes some time until a transaction happens. So for example, I played once blackjack on a blockchain, and it was quite interesting because I wanted to know how it works. And yeah, so if I wait 20 seconds for each card I get or each action I want to do, that's not really the user experience you want. That's not really user-friendly. So the execution time takes a longer time, and that's not something that's really interesting. Also, it can be very expensive. So while the storage of the smart contract, you only have to pay it once, every transfer or every action you execute on the smart contract has to be paid. And for example, if I pay 10 cents for each action I make in blackjack, then this becomes a very expensive way of gambling on the blockchain. Also, as this code is open on the blockchain, it can also be easily copied. So if someone did a lot of work in writing a smart contract, anyone can copy it and use it. And then also, there is no real way to update the software. So if there is a bug in your smart contract, in your application, you have really no way of fixing it. So if there's a bug in there and there's money on it and people find the bug, they will drain your application. And that's something that's very, very dangerous. But now this is a simple topic, the lottery example, but we think about many, many more examples, and I'll come to this in a second, where you can actually use it. But there is one big problem in blockchains, and this is something that when you discuss blockchain use cases, you have to always be aware of, and this is the so-called Oracle problem. But what is the Oracle problem? The blockchain itself and the applications running on it, they need to be deterministic. Deterministic means that every action you execute needs to produce the same result. For example, if I add 1 plus 1, it will always result in 2. But for example, if I do a query to weather.com, give me the current Celsius degrees for Munich, then this will change for many requests. So if I execute this request now, I don't know, it will point out 27 degrees. If I do this tomorrow, it will point out something different. Or if other parties in my network will do this function, then obviously also a different result will come out of it. And this is the reason we need this determinism. We need that the function always returns the same output, because our complete network wants to validate if our transaction was correct. And therefore, we cannot access external services. We cannot call weather.com. That's not possible. But we always need a third party, a oracle, that inputs data onto the blockchain. And that's very, very different, or it's very difficult and very dangerous, because now the outcome of our application solely depends on the oracle here. So if the oracle is flawed, if the oracle breaks down, if the oracle is hacked, they can, for example, if you bet on the weather, so people bet on the weather for whatever reasons, maybe also as an insurance, so to say, and this insurance that, or this application that provides the data about the weather to the blockchain is flawed, then obviously your application is flawed. And this is the biggest problem in blockchain. And it's always the same rule, garbage in, garbage out. If you do not have reliable data in your blockchain, then it's worthless. Okay, that's about that. And let's now continue to the use cases. Now, finally. So when we talk about use cases in blockchain, the situation was following. In traditional approaches, we have a problem and we need a solution for it. So if you are in some company, in your private life, you always have a problem and you need to think about, okay, how am I going to solve this? And this is something that's different in blockchain. People started working with blockchain and thought blockchain is a super cool application and it's super awesome and all this super stuff. But they did not know about the problem. They had no idea what problem they wanted to solve with blockchain. And that's still to this day really, really difficult to come up with valid problems that blockchain really solves. And that's also to this day, I'm not too sure if, for example, this next slide here that we see here, where I am listing a lot of use cases, we will go into them, if they actually make sense to be solved by blockchain. I'm not too sure. I'm not really sure. We can take a look at a little bit there. So that's a overview from my professor. So he did this. So I just copy it here for discussion purposes. But let's look at some industry, for example, finance. So what finance is a replacement of intermediaries in transactions. I think that's a very valid use case. So for example, there is a lot of people who are dependent on, for example, Western Union to transfer money to their relatives, for example, and paying or using Western Union or other services is very expensive. Transferring with Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies could be a little bit cheaper. So I would say that's somehow a valid use case, for example. Also, what we have here is ICOs. ICOs is a so-called initial coin offering, so that you as a startup, you basically propose your own currency and sell it. And as your company grows, this coins, so to say, become worth more. So it's more like some kind of security that you say, okay, this is my share of this company that I bought at the beginning of this startup. That's what happened in 2017. A lot of things happened there. But if we look at other industries, for example, automotive, supply chain tracking is something that's discussed heavily. Everyone wants to track their supply chain with blockchain, and I'm personally not really a huge fan of that, because there you have the Oracle problem I just mentioned. You need to be able to have valid sensors that tell you where exactly each component of your car is. If you don't have that, if you don't have reliable sensors, then your blockchain solution is worth shit. No one cares about that. And that's something I think, therefore I think that's not a too good use case. Also in energy departments, when you say electricity trading, so how can you ensure that the illicit electricity you send to other people is actually recognized by the blockchain? So, and that's really difficult. But I'm more a fan of something like, for example, digital identity. For example, the certificates of origin of digital certificates. So in terms of what we do at the TUM right now is we want students to be able to get their degree, their master's degree, for example, as a digital version, and we secure this digital version of the certificate on the blockchain so that the student is able to prove the possession and the correctness of the certificate later on to third parties, to potential employers, stuff like that. So that's something I'm a big fan of. And yeah, so many more. I won't go into detail. I think we can focus on two use cases I want to talk a little bit more about. Is first of all, digital identity, because that's also something I'm working on. And digital identity is the idea is that we have a non-forgeable proof of identity via the blockchain instead of analog passports. And for example, the World Food Program uses this for refugees to enable them a better integration into their systems. And you have to think about identity. When do you actually use identity? So for example, you order something by Amazon, or you have some online shops, or Facebook or Twitter or whatever you use. And all these systems are very centralized. So these entities control what you see, what the data in your account is, if you're allowed to use the platform, and you cannot really use these identities cross-platform. So I cannot use my Twitter credentials to log into Facebook, so to say. But with that, we can move this part where identification happens to a blockchain, to a decentralized system where no one can really kick me out of the system. And I can use this identity to go to each and every one of these systems and say, hey, I'm Uli, that's my data. That's data that has been attributed to me, for example, by the government, by banks, by some other parties. And this makes it much more easier for me to say, okay, who is allowed to see my data? It also makes it much more convenient for me because I don't have to handle thousands of accounts, but I only have one identity or a set of identities which I can use. So that's a very, very powerful use case, but it also requires a lot of adoption. So it's not that like we are, tomorrow it's going to be changing, but it will take years until we are there. And the second use case I also want to mention about blockchain is the idea of copyright. So copyright or patent is something that is broken, in my opinion, because companies just pay a shitload of money to people that they propose patents, that they think of something that could potentially influence the success of the business in the future. And that's something a lot of companies work on, is in terms of, okay, how can we enable a much more easy and much more secure way to secure ideas. And this is, for example, what Bernstein does. It's a startup in Munich, Bernstein.io. And they allow you to upload the documents, the fingerprint of documents, to the Bitcoin blockchain. And as the Bitcoin blockchain is so secure, Bitcoin also works as a timestamp. So if I upload a file, then I cannot fake it that it was another date than today. So that's very powerful for this technology to use. And yeah, I want to talk a little bit now about the success factors for use cases. So what we now see a lot of them, and I want to talk a little bit about what my personal opinion is, where does it make the most sense to use blockchain? And I have 5 properties here, and I have 2 applications here that I grew into here. And the first one is the amount of users. And I think the more users you have in your system, the better blockchain is suited to, because it really scales well in terms of how many people can participate in the network. So there is no real cost to that. You also have a huge question about trust. So for example, if you want to use blockchain within your company, then that's a stupid idea. Why? Because you trust your employees. So you maybe not trust them to every degree, but to a certain degree, otherwise you would not employ them. Therefore, it makes only sense if you have a system where you do not trust each other, because the blockchain will provide the trust for you. Also, the aforementioned transparency is a very important property. So if you have a high privacy requirements in terms of, okay, I don't want other people know what I'm doing, then you should not really opt for a blockchain. Also, in terms of technical factors, is a write-intensive versus a read-intensiveness system. The idea is that the reading in such systems is very cheap. So you have all the data, it's fully synced, and therefore you can read locally. But writing, you have to write to every participant in the network. And therefore it's very expensive to write, but it's very cheap to read. So therefore, the more you read, the better, or the application requires. And also the complexity of your application is really, really important, because the higher the application, the higher the complexity is, the more difficult it is to make it bug-free. And as I said before, if you have bugs, then you're really for some bad time. So make your application as less complex as possible, and therefore you're very, very good into it. So that's the part here. Okay, that's about the use case. I think we can take now an outlook at and summarize what's going on. So let's first talk about advantages and disadvantages. So first of all, blockchain is the first genuine decentralized monetary and a system that allows applications. Really decentralized, trustless applications. That is really something that's new, that it has not been there before. It is decentralized. So there is no possibility of manipulation by a central instance. There is no trust required, and you have a very high resilience against attacks. Also, you have the highest possible transparency. So all transactions are openly viewable and all money can be tracked. Also, it's a very inclusive system, so anyone can and may participate. You only need an internet connection and not a very fast one. So that's also usable in foreign parts of the world, and we have promising applications. But also we have some disadvantages. So obviously the very high energy consumption I mentioned before, the long waiting times. So in Bitcoin, it takes up to 60 minutes until a transaction really can be accepted as valid. Also, the amount of transactions that can be used is very low. We have 7 transactions per second right now in Bitcoin, in comparison to Visa, up to 40,000. So that's really, really, really not a system that can be used by everyone every time in the world. So, but that's something we need to solve by technology. And obviously, we have constantly growing storage requirements. So storing these transactions all is very, very expensive and is ever growing. And as a question already before mentioned or suggested, that regulation or corrective intervention is very, very difficult. So what does the technology deliver for us? The technology, in the end, we will get an increased sustainability. So the Bitcoin energy consumption is something that we were having a hard time in the future. I'm not sure if we can ever change it, but all other applications, all other blockchains will opt for more energy efficient algorithms. So that's definitely the case. We will have a lot of work in the scalability area so that much more transactions can be executed. Smart contracts will get bigger, will get securer, will get faster. So that's also what's going on here. And the usage in many different industries is on its way. And what else do we need for a successful future in blockchain? First of all, we need some kind of crypto euro because Bitcoin itself is not really stable. We need some stable currencies on there. We need definitely acceptance from the end users, from people like you, to say, okay, we get it, we understand it, we want to use it. And killer apps, I think that's something that's already on the way. But apart from that, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. And I think we now have a time for questions and discussion.
Thank you, Uli, for this presentation. We have already some questions.
Very good.
We can start with them if you are also ready. First,
I'm ready, yeah.
The rights of users. Mr. Atlas asks, isn't it possible to decide by the regulators, the members of the network, to increase the number of Bitcoins from 21 million to, for example, 21 million plus 1?
So the question is if we could increase the number of the maximum supply, so to say.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so obviously there is some that's some advanced discussion. How can we update rules in the network? And in Bitcoin, this is a very intensive and a very conservative way of updating. So a lot of people need to agree on updates, and this is a heavy discussion that's going on. And but the 21 million Bitcoin could in theory be changed, but in practice there won't be a majority for that. So that's really 21 million is like the holy grail of Bitcoin. If you would change that, you would break it.
Mr. Atlas also asks, why is Bitcoin priced in USD?
I think that's something like why is oil priced in US dollars? I think that's one of the most widely used currencies, but you can also go to exchanges and listen at euro prices. So that really depends on who you ask. I'm doing it in dollars because that's if you talk in international research, and it's only US dollars.
We have another question from Mr. Gur. Do you think governments are promoting Bitcoin?
No. I think the opposite happens because a Bitcoin as a means to money, as that it's money, or people could view it as money, And I think one of the most powerful tools a government has is the monetary policy. The ability to create money out of thin air or to create euros or dollars is something that has made these governments been able to sustain them for themselves. So if we look at the US, they are printing dollars and dollars and dollars, or at the Europe or and anyone everywhere, they are printing money, and which helps them to finance themselves, to keep an inflation up, which is good. So inflation is something that we should aim for instead of deflation. And but giving this out of your hand is something that the governments do not really want.
Another question from Mr. Karahan. Is it possible to use blockchain to secure the privacy of our personal or social media communication?
So there are some solutions out there which try to bring these this communication and social networks to blockchain. But the issue is, or the main advantage that Facebook or something like that has, is that you do not really have this. You don't have to be online for receiving messages, for example. So you can log into your Facebook account, receive a message at 3 a.m. in the morning with all your devices powered off. But for example, if you would lift this up to some kind of peer-to-peer technology with using Bitcoin, then you would need to be online to receive messages. That's definitely something that's more complicated.
We have another question regarding privacy and the identification mechanisms. Do you see blockchain identity applications someday beginning to replace government-issued identifications, such as driver licenses or passports? This was a question from Mr. Arut.
So we will not see blockchain replacing identity in terms of that. We do not have a government which gives us some document or some ID. The reason for that is because we need some kind of root of trust. So the blockchain itself, it cannot be a root of trust because anyone can input data, or we have no means of controlling who puts data in. And therefore, we need the government to issue credentials. But it could be the way that, for example, I have a digital identity on the blockchain, and the government uses some mechanism to say, okay, that's really Ulrich. And now I have some kind of credential from my government, and I can take this digital one and go around and show everyone that I'm actually Ulrich, which is guaranteed by the government that this is the case. But it's more like a synergy than really opposing technologies.
We have a few questions regarding different cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
One of them I'm going to ask is from Mr. Önan. Do other cryptocurrencies stand inferior when compared to Bitcoin? And another question from Mr. Atlas is, Facebook is trying to establish its own cryptocurrency. For example, given the bad reputation of the company and management, could we assume that it will fail?
Okay, so about other. Okay, sorry.
You can feel. I don't know if you will answer it.
Yeah, so I think we make this a little bit separate because because first of all, so other cryptocurrencies, there are thousands of cryptocurrencies out there. So you can go to coinmarketcap.com and see there are 2,000 currencies there are listed, and I think relevant are 15 or 20, 25 currencies, cryptocurrencies that work in a similar scheme. And all of these currencies have different value propositions. So for example, Ethereum is the currency which allows you to create smart contracts. So this is the largest blockchain which enables smart contracts. If you, for example, look at Monero is a cryptocurrency which do not support smart contracts, but they allow private transactions. So we cannot we cannot really trace any money. So this is a purely anonymous currency, which is also used for darknet activities. So that's the main difference. So the main difference is always in this unique selling point, or selling proposition of these currencies, and there are thousands of features. How many transactions are there per second? Privacy, functionalities. That's not really. We cannot really give a small overview. That's not really how it works. And about Libra, Libra is something that's very interesting. And I think also we have to look at. Because given the reputation of Facebook, could be like that it's bad and it will fail. It could. I don't know. But Libra is from the technology point of view, I read through the technical white paper. So there's always some kind of paper that describes how the system works. And it's actually very similar to technologies we already see. So it's similar in terms of how the transactions work. Stuff like that is similar to, for example, to Ethereum. We don't have to see the details here, but this is nothing new. The new part here is that this network is not run by anyone, but by partners of Facebook, and that Facebook is able to onboard 1.5 billion users to this currency instantaneously. And this is what I mentioned in my last point in the slide. Maybe you remember it. I said that we need the acceptance of the people. And if we have Facebook with 1.5 users in WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, then, and all these people are onboarded to one currency and can use this in this application, then we will have a cryptocurrency that has so many more users than Bitcoin or all other currencies combined. And that's something that will drive the adoption of Bitcoin, of Libra very, very fast. And that's something I think is, my private personal opinion is that it's dangerous, because in the second they will introduce this, they would be able to the company Facebook would be able to define a monetary policy for countries which do not have a valid monetary system themselves. So Venezuela, for example, or other countries where money is out of hands, where it doesn't work properly, Facebook would be a trustworthy partner there and would have an impact there. So I think it's dangerous, because I don't think monetary policy should be the responsibility of a company, especially not Facebook.
The other question was about a recommendation for a cryptocurrency to invest. I think we mentioned that that's something that we will not answer here. And I'd like to give the word to Mr. Baysal. Cem abi again. I think you are muted.
Come on. Yuli, can you send me the copy of your presentation?
I can do that, yeah.
Can you do that? To my email address. Okay, I can deliver it to all the attendants then. Secondly, maybe this goes to both of you, especially you, Yuli. Maybe we should sort of bring the verbal discussions, verbal questions. So maybe we can have a sort of liven up the questions and the discussion a bit. What do you say?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Maybe I shortly answer the question on recommendation for investment.
Yes.
I don't do recommendations for investments. Everyone has to do this on their own. I don't recommend anything. I'm just giving technical details.
Sure.
I have no investment advice for you. I'm sorry.
No. That's not. No, we'll stop the the chat questions. Tamam mı Kıvanç? And since you're a co-host, can your attendants raise hands if you want to add something? And then Kıvanç, you're the co-host, so you can unmute them and let them ask the question, speak up.
Yes, I can't see anyone raising hands right now. If anyone feels like asking a question in person, please. We have to click participants, I think, and then there is the option to raise hands.
Kıvanç, Ahmet raise hand yaptı, ben sesini açıyorum.
Of course, thank you.
Teşekkür ederim. Çok güzel bir sunumdu. I was out for a while, so if this question has been asked, apologies. Does the world know who actually started the Bitcoin?
Yeah. So Bitcoin was created by the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. And to this day, there are some emails available, so we know some communication from Satoshi Nakamoto, but we don't know who he is or who she is or if it is a team. So some linguists have analyzed the emails, stuff all around, but we only have we can only speculate. We don't know.
Ali Murat Atlas. Sesini açtım. Abi sesini açtım.
Mr. Ali Murat Atlas will ask a question.
So I see him speaking, but I can't hear him, unfortunately.
Now yes.
Now yes? Okay. There's a time lapse. Okay, thank you, Uli, for the nice presentation. I just wanted to ask you, isn't it a little bit naive to think that there will be this, or any cryptocurrency, not regulated by anybody, but just the members or the owners of them, and it will be available for many to somehow exchange?
So if you want to use Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies as really a means of transferring money or using it as a daily life money, I agree with you. It's naive. The system doesn't support the amount of transactions. There is no real guarantee for it. The prices fluctuate way too heavy. I fully agree with that. And from my personal view, Bitcoin is something more like a gold or some kind of asset that you're able to hold and that somehow sustains its value through demand and supply. And then it makes much more sense because there is also no one in the world who regulates gold. There is no one who's able to say, okay, let's print new gold. So, but it's really difficult to argue about that. I fully agree. And a lot of this technology and a lot of what we see here and a lot of what I proposed today or talked about use cases is so far away, guaranteed 5 to 10 years way ahead of us. So we really in the beginnings here, yeah.
I see some chat, but people are thanking for the presentation. I don't see anyone raising their hands, but I have a question that I'd like to ask. It has been asked in our exercises. What do you think about the risks of quantum computing on blockchain?
Yeah, quantum computing and blockchains. Very interesting discussion. So quantum computing is, the idea of quantum computing is that it can calculate the private password out of your public identity. So I mentioned this before, this digital identity, you have a face and you have a private password, and usually you cannot calculate the password out of this face, so to say. But with quantum computing, that would be possible to so to say, calculate that. And that's definitely dangerous, not only for Bitcoin, but it's dangerous for every technology we use. So Zoom uses encryption. If you go in the web, you use encryption. If you put out your phone, you use encryption every day in your daily life, even if you don't know it. But with mobile PC, that's basically standard. And these systems will all break. But in Bitcoin, there is what happened. So I think that is a little bit too technical right now. But in Bitcoin, you could protect your Bitcoins actually from being stolen by a quantum computer if you use a mechanism called pay-to-public script hash. So the idea is that you don't have the face on the blockchain, but you have the fingerprint of the face on the blockchain. And this mechanism of this fingerprinting, this is not something a quantum computer can revert. So that's the idea. If something is protected by a hash, by this fingerprint, it cannot be attacked by the quantum computer, but it's only secured by this identity mechanism, then it can be attacked by a quantum computer. But as I said, we have much more bigger problems than Bitcoin if we have a quantum computer who can really break encryption.
Kıvanç, I have a question.
Of course.
Uli, Are there any questions we did not ask that you wish to answer? That
yeah, this is an excellent question, and so there is so much more to talk about. And so Kıvanç, you know, we get a whole lecture with 14 lecture slots, which 1.5 hours plus 1.5. So we have 2 times a week, 3 hours for 14 weeks. We only talk about blockchain and Bitcoin and all these details. And it's so much. There is so much to talk about. And what question would there be? Yeah, I think we are actually quite good with the questions. I really like the ones. So far, it's really very engaging. Thank you for all the questions.
Thank you for your presentation. Really, thanks a lot. And we'll be looking forward to your copy of your presentation, and we'll stay in touch. And maybe one last question. What would you suggest for Bitcoin beginners? Where do you suggest they follow the issue? Which website or where, and where to begin for a beginner? Someone who wants to know a bit more about blockchain.
Yeah, so I recommend my totally selfishness. I recommend my lecture slides. That's something I would really recommend. And we rely on a book in there, and that's the Bitcoin book from Princeton University. That's a very if you're interested in the technical details, that's something that's very, very valid. If you are interested in, so to say, in you want to buy something, you want to invest in Bitcoin or something like that, I would really suggest to do your research, really look into the website, try to understand what's going on, because otherwise there is so much scam out there. There's so much danger out there, and a lot of people get scammed using Bitcoin. So I would recommend going to bitcoin.org. That's the official website of Bitcoin, where a lot of information is maintained about how it works, what you can do. And when you want to continue with that, I would try to look at famous exchanges. So just Google Bitcoin exchanges, and you'll find really a large list. And there are many valid solutions for that. And then you can start investing, for example. But from the technical, if you're interested in technical details, go to the book, go to our slides, write an email to Kıvanç. He's the expert after this semester. And but apart from that, stay open, stay open-minded, and think everything through before you spend somewhere money.
Okay, Kıvanç, thank you and Uli very much for your presentation. And again, as I said, we'll stay in touch. But meanwhile, if you don't have anything else to say, we have a small announcement to make for the next week, and you're more than welcome to listen to it, of course.
Thank you.
Şimdi haftaya cumartesi aramızda Metin Başoğlu var. Dün de belki söylemiştim. Onun bu bayağı psikiyatri konusunda derin araştırmaları var. 30 yıldır başladı ama kendisi klinik psikiyatristi değil, araştırmacı. Metin, öbür cumartesi hangi konuları, saat yine 16 diye düşünüyoruz, sokağa çıkma kısıtlaması gelmezse. Metin'in bir sürü İngiltere'de de basılmış çalışmaları var. Metin, sen bir kısa sunum yapar mısın lütfen? Haftaya ne konuşmayı düşünüyorsun? Sesin açık.
Merhaba, sesim geliyor mu?
Geliyor, gayet iyi.
Duyuyorsunuz değil mi?
Evet, görüyoruz seni.
Önce bir merhaba diyeyim arkadaşlara.
Tamam.
Tavaslara, Tarsus'a çoktan beri görüşmedik. Şimdi haftaya tam olarak şemasını ben oturtamadım kafamda. Seninle konuşacağız anlaştığımız gibi ama Kısaca özet olarak 30 yıldan beri dediğin gibi yaptığım çalışmalardan biraz bahsetmenin yararlı olabileceğini düşündüm. Bir dönem yapılan ve birbirini izleyen çalışmalar bunlar. İşte 80'li yıllarda işkence travmasıyla başlayan, ondan sonra savaş travmasına geçen işte eski Yugoslavya ülkelerinde yaptığımız çalışmalar. Sonra 99'da da Türkiye'deki 99 depreminden sonra devam eden çalışmalar ve de en sonunda da işte bu salgın dönemine ilişkin bu çalışmaların ne ifade ettiği, nasıl değerlendirilebileceği, yani salgın ortamındaki insan psikolojisinin nasıl değerlendirilebileceği vesaire. Böylesine bir dizi konu kafamda var. Fakat bir seansa sığabilecek kadar malzeme biraz fazla aslında. Yani bir seansta çok sıkışık olur ve çünkü her türlü kitlesel felaketin değişik şeyleri var. Konuşulması gereken yönleri var. Tabii ne kadar ilginizi çekiyor bilmiyorum. Belki 2 seans da olabileceğini düşündüm. İşkence ve savaş travmasıyla başlayıp işte bizim 30 yılda geliştirdiğimiz bir kuramsal model var. Bu model doğrultusunda bu tür kitlesel felaketlerin birey ve toplum üzerindeki etkilerini nasıl anlayabileceğimize yardımcı olabilecek bir model. Ve aynı zamanda da bu model işte bir dönemde, yani deprem olayından sonra da bir tedavi modeline dönüşmüş durumda. Kitlesel felaketlerde işte topluma iletilebilecek tedavi modelleri neler olabilir? Çok kısaca böyle konular. Bu konuda aslında fikrinizi de öğrenmek isterim. Yani ne kadar ayrıntılı bir prezentasyon dinlemeye hazır hissedersiniz kendinizi. Bir seferde mi, 2 seferde mi olsun? 2 seferde olursa işkence ve savaş travmasını ilk seansta almayı düşünüyorum. Ondan sonra da deprem ve salgın felaketlerini ele almayı düşünüyorum. Uygun geliyorsa size bir feedback verirseniz ben de ona göre bir planlama yaparım.
Metin çok teşekkürler. Seninle yarın ben sizden üçümüz Zoom yapıyoruz. Yarın sizden davetiyesini bekliyorum 1 saat önce. Onu anlaşmıştık. Değişiklik yok değil mi orada?
Orada değişiklik var.
Biz bir dakika sen kal
yani
o zaman.
Ben hallettim.
Metin bir dakika izin ver. Sen kal, biz herkesi iyi akşamlar diyelim. İsteyenler çıkabilsin. Ama isteyenler kalsın dinlesin. Okey. Kıvanç siz duruyorsunuz. Ama artık adam sıkılabilir bizim konuşmalarımızdan. Yani nasıl isterseniz.
Yes,
Memnuniyetle de kalabilirsiniz. Yani biz şimdi Metin'le öbür cumartesi programı nasıl yapacağımızı, yarın nasıl konuşacağızı tartışacağız.
Ben Uli'ye ileteyim. Uli, I think the rest of the talk will be about next week's planning. I thank you also for accepting our invitation for this talk. And I'd like.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. It was a it's our pleasure.
I'd like to say I'm also very honored to be the moderator today. To all of all the people who graduated earlier than me from my high school. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. And
okay, Uli,
bye-bye.
I will be sending your link again. I did send it, the link Kıvanç sent me, to all the attendants, along with the copy of the file that you use for your presentation.
Yeah, I'll send you that right now.
Okay, thanks a lot again, and have a nice evening.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Kıvanç sana da teşekkürler. Sen yine katılmaya devam edebilir. Sen dün ne kadar kaldın toplantıda? Dün.
Ben dün 1 saat kadar kaldım ama dün biraz benim internetim kötüydü.
Eşim müsaade etti mi 1 saat kalmaya?
başlayınca ayrılamadım açıkçası.
Tamam, bak sana teşekkürler de var. Şimdi
Görüyorum.
Metin.
Ben
Tamam.
çok rica ederim. Ben onur duyduğumu söyleyeyim tekrar.
Metin yine şey kal, yani herkes isteyen dinleyebilir. Sen girmişsin tabii, 2 kişilik, birisinden Mehmet gibi yapıyorsun. Mehmet Özel de Mehmet Özel de öyle yapıyor. Birinden görüntü, öbüründen de ses ve kamera, değil mi? Onun için 2 kare işgal ediyorsun. Metin.
Ben yani bilgisayarda da açtım. Bir de iPad'de var. Yani ses iPad'den gidiyor. Görüntü bilgisayardan.
Metin, şimdi gelelim. Yarın 2 civarı ve 3 civarı Zoom yapıyor muyuz üçümüz? Sen, ben, Sıla, yoksa yapmayalım mı?
Sıla gelmiyor. Gelmesine gerek yok çünkü bugün hallettik yani bu.
Çok güzel, belli, doğru, gereksiz oldu. İkimiz yapalım
iPad'i
mı?
kullanacağım. İkimiz
Veya
yapabiliriz.
şimdi
aslında.
ikimiz devam edelim. Yarına tekrardan uğraşmayalım.
Yani evet. Vaktim
Tamam.
varsa benim
Şimdi
var.
bak, bir şey söyleyeceğim. Senin ki bilmiyorum, şimdi diğerleri de var. Kıvanç var, Şerif Boyacı var. O da Talas'tan, abindir ona göre bak. Benim de abim ama ben yüce modda olduğum için onlar bana saygı gösteriyorlar. Şimdi iki tane güzel konular, çok geniş. Bak, buradakilerin de açık fikrini alalım. Daha burada Canev var mesela. Sesini kendi kısmış galiba. İlker var. Ahmet Hamdi var. Onlar üçünün sesi kısık da belki kaçtılar keratalar. Ama ben onların sesini şöyle istediği kendileri açabilecek hale getireyim. Şimdi diğerlerine soruyorum. 2 üst üste aynı konu üzerine veya aynı kişinin verdiği biraz zorlamalı olabilir mi der misiniz? Yani biz bu 21. 22. falan galiba oldu. Görüşlerinizi Şerif, sen ne diyorsun?
Vallahi bence konu iki şeyi sağlayacak kadar ilgi sağlamaz yani diye düşünüyorum grupta.
Yaz geldiği için özellikle. Yaz geldiği için.
Evet. Bir de hareketlenmeye başladı insanlar.
Evet. Ondan daha çok endişe ediyorum.
Evet. Mesela
bugün kısa bir kaydı kapatayım.